Welcome back to Rule 8 Politics, where we always tell the truth or at least don't lie. I am Jeremy Sammons. Joining with me today is Zach Sacker. On today's show, we have lined up the new COVID relief legislation that is expected to pass this evening. We have the SolarWinds cyber espionage campaign that has recently been brought to light. And we have the new COVID variant that has been detected in Europe. So, Zach, let's kick it off with what's going on with this new round of COVID relief.
Sounds good. And thank God we got something coming through the pipeline for all the struggling people out there. We do have some cash. Could have been more. I wish it was more, but $600 should be going out to everybody who received a stimulus check the last time, although it's half the amount. Um, so we got that done, and there's a few other things in the package too. But this could have been done last week. Maybe we should, take a few steps back and talk about how we got here. There was like a last minute curveball. Um, Senator Pat Toomey almost derailed this whole thing. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so there was a major point of contention with this legislation. Um, it was mainly centered around one senator, Pat Toomey, who was very concerned with the way that uh, with the first CARES Act legislation, the way that it authorized the Federal Reserve to actually loan directly to local municipalities and also to like mid-sized businesses. Um, I guess overall, the program in and of itself was kind of a failure. So back in March, Congress passed the CARES Act, and they gave they authorized the Fed essentially $450 billion that they could lend directly from the Federal Reserve to local municipalities, mid-sized businesses, and that's just the two big ones. But a lot of these funds went unused. So Toomey and other Republican legislators were concerned that come the next Biden administration that they were going to leverage this function of the Federal Reserve to circumvent Congress and provide direct relief to local governments without congressional approval. So, given the fact that there was, hundreds of billions of dollars just sitting in a pile at the Federal Reserve, well, I guess if, depending on who the Biden administration nominates to run the Fed, well, I guess potentially you could have had an issue there of where we're circumventing congressional action. You could have bailed out states that needed help, and the argument that's being made is that it's these quote unquote failing blue states that need relief the most, which may or may not be the case. And come 2021, when states really start to feel the crunch from lost revenues, this potentially could blow up in their face. It's not sure if it was really the best thing to do, given on the we're still in the midst of a global deadly pandemic. Cutting off a pathway for aid might be a little short-sighted. What do you think on the situation, Zach?
It's. I think it's something that it was so left field. Last week we were talking about the stimulus proposals, and what we had said last week, we pretty much outlined what was probably going to happen, and that was there was going to be, one side was arguing for $1,200 direct checks. There was another side saying nothing, and then President Trump said, "Why don't we meet in the middle and do $600 direct checks?" And then the two most contentious issues we had talked about. The Republicans wanted liability protections, coronavirus related liability protections for businesses. The Democrats wanted this direct aid to state and local governments, essentially a bailout of the blue states, as the Republicans were saying. They agreed to drop that from the package. And this probably could have gotten done like early on last week. and then this Fed issue just kind of came out of nowhere. Because as you just laid out, there was this fear that the incoming administration was going to be able to use these leftover funds to get their bailout of the blue cities and states. How do I feel about it? I think I'm just more pissed off that it took an extra week, because this package,
Yeah.
I mean, it's very late. This should have been done months and months ago. There hasn't been anything since the CARES package came out, I believe in March. It's been a very long time. Compare us to any other industrial country, and those governments have done much more for their people, and the stress levels aren't nearly as high, and we're not exactly doing better than a lot of these other countries in terms of death rates and transmission rates. So, we've just kind of, our response to the coronavirus, both economically and in terms of health, has just not been very good. But anyway, the Senator Pat Toomey, what was interesting was that the CARES package, these programs that that were given to the Fed in the CARES package, really were supposed to expire at the end of the year anyway.
Mhm.
So it sounds like what Senator Toomey wanted to do, and other Republicans, was just reiterate this fact that it expires on Friday. I think part of the fear, as it relates to the Democrats being able to use these leftover funds to bail out the state and local governments, part of the fear, I think, was in passing this new package. Does this mean, even if there's no language regarding the Fed in the package, does this new package replace the CARES Act and essentially mean that the deadline that was put in the CARES Act no longer applies because there's an updated version? It's like a an update for your video game. All the there's all this new stuff that comes in the update, and is one of the new things in the update is they're getting rid of the expiration on the Fed's lending powers program. So this whole situation, why it was extended another week, really had to do with language, like really nerdy legal stuff. What is the language in the bill? Are the Democrats going to have the ability to argue that this expiration date no longer applies because there's an updated version of the CARES package, which is this new act? Not even sure if the stimulus package has an official name or anything. But so how do I feel? I never really answered that. I don't have much personal feelings on this one way or another, other than it should have been done sooner, and there should have been more aid directly to people, because that money is most efficiently spent, more than I think any other program that's in the government's arsenal.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And like, the week that, both sides spent, fighting about whether or not we're, going to provide relief for local governments, if we're going to provide liability protection. I mean, both those were ultimately dropped in this legislation. They both dropped it. It took them a week to do it. Like, yeah, it's you could have just left it both sides could have left it off the table from the very beginning. We could have ironed out this goofy Federal Reserve legislation, which was, as you mentioned, kind of already going to be worked out already with the original CARES Act. Like, the money that wasn't spent was supposed to be sent back to the Federal Reserve, and you were basically done with it. So I mean, it was we wasted a bunch of time making it seem like they were doing something, but in reality, they were doing mostly nothing at all. And we're left with $600 checks instead of $1,200. Unemployment benefits are set at an additional 300 instead of, I believe, has it been 300 for a while, or was it 400 up until now?
I think it's been 300 for a while. Initially it was 600, and
Right.
then I think it did go down to 400 for a little bit, and then we were at 300. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
but
But
yeah, it is
it's
300 moving forward.
mhm. Which also with the with the expiration dates built into that, with with the eviction moratorium, with the expanded um, food assistance programs, other stuff like that, expiring at the
Mhm.
end of January. Well, then hopefully we can address this issue with a different, well, with the Biden administration and
Yeah.
potentially a different Senate. That the House makeup will largely still be the same unless something crazy happens, and the Democrats might be able to, or nearly be able to, put whatever they want into any package
hmm
coming up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is worth noting that Joe Biden is basically describing this bill as a down payment. He's saying that there's going to be more stimulus once he takes the oath of office, and that could come as soon as late January. So, yeah, this should there. Hopefully, there's more on the way, and hopefully, the next package is better. Um, you know, we really should have it now, but it's the future is better than nothing at all. So yeah, just hopefully the next package is is bigger and better.
I think the only thing that I'm really most interested come February when we revisit this subject is going to be whether or not Kamala Harris supports recurring cash payments or not. If she's going to be the deciding vote in the Senate potentially, is she still going to support that idea, support that type of legislation, or is she going to, bow down to the party and and go with normal democratic solutions, which is layers and layers of a nanny state bureaucracy.
Mhm. Now,
So
does that have support in Congress? Continuing direct payments?
I, I would have to double check, and I am, if my memory serves me correctly, because I haven't looked into it, but HR, at least in the House, HR 6496, I believe had 70 or 60 or 70 co-sponsors. I don't
Hmm.
remember what the Senate bills were, but the legislation that was proposed by Ro Khanna and Tim Ryan did have a pretty hefty amount of support behind it, and that was
Mhm.
the Emergency Money for the People Act. That was a recurring $2,000 a month.
Okay, so we just had a technical difficulty, but our system is back online, and we're actually ready to move on to the next topic, which was another major development that we just found out about this week. Um, the U.S. government and many major corporations throughout the country were hacked by the Russian government. All fingerprints are leading back to Russia. Um, and every day we're finding out more and more information about this breach. It's being called the largest act of espionage, essentially, on the U.S., or at least cyber espionage, conducted against the U.S. Um, we're still trying to figure out the scope and the magnitude of this. But Jeremy, what are your initial thoughts on the matter?
Yeah, this is a huge deal. I I'm not sure what. Yeah, I don't watch cable news very often, so I'm not sure what's going on in the coverage there. But I wonder if they really are, giving this the attention that it deserves, because it is truly the largest cyber attack on this country, or probably in the history of cyber warfare, and its ramifications are like still unknown. So,
Hmm.
quick rundown of what happened was there was this company called SolarWinds. They provide IT support for everybody and their brother. We're talking the State Department, the Commerce Department, the city of Austin, Texas, Microsoft, I mean, they're like if not the biggest, one of the biggest IT support companies on this planet. So it appears that Russia was able to successfully install malware into their programs, like so efficiently and effectively that it was actually included in system updates for SolarWinds products. So it's a very sophisticated attack.
Hmm. So
And what's also even
essentially,
crazy about this, or the craziest part, I'll go ahead.
no, keep going, keep going.
I would say, so what's even the craziest part about this? All right, so it's still happening. Like the hack has not stopped. Like if you are still using a SolarWinds product, they are still actively harvesting that information from your data systems, and
Hmm.
it will likely be a very long time before they figure out how to turn this off, because it's so far widespread. All right, so the SolarWinds hack initially affected 18,000 SolarWinds customers, who then passed that virus on to their customers, who then went on to pass a virus on to their customers. So it's a giant worm. It's absolutely everywhere. And so how you get something that is this rooted in the entire infrastructure of basically the planet at this
Hmm.
point, it's crazy. It is seriously.
Hmm.
I mean, Mitt Romney was incorrect when he described this as like something equivalent to the attack on Pearl Harbor. It is
Hmm.
massive.
And just to be clear, this is not just a regular virus. This is actually giving the Russians access to view our data and also manipulate data. So, the Treasury Department or the the National Institutes of Health could be conducting some kind of survey. The Russians can change the data in that survey, and our leaders could be getting faulty information that's designed for us to make policy that really isn't addressing the real problems or something, because our politicians and our media is reliant on faulty data. It's it's not good. We really have to assume that the Russians have access to basically all the information that each of these agencies and non-governmental organizations um, have. So, if Russia attacked so supposedly they gain access to the Department of Homeland Security. Um, we have to assume that pretty much everything that the Department of Homeland Security knows, the Russians now know.
Mhm.
That's a pretty big deal, and that's just not me saying that. That is Tom Bassert, who was the former Homeland Security advisor to President Trump before he was fired. He was actually fired in a pretty famous way. He found out from the media that he was getting fired before he was actually fired. Um, he was also the deputy Homeland Security advisor to George W. Bush. Um, he wrote a New York Times opinion article, um, and he basically said that he says, quote, the actual and perceived control of so many important networks could easily be used to undermine public and consumer trust in data, written communications, and services. In the networks that the Russians control, they have the power to destroy or alter data and impersonate legitimate people. Domestic and geopolitical tensions could escalate quite easily if they use their access to malign influence and misinformation, both hallmarks of Russian behavior. So this is very, very serious stuff. Um, you know, we may have the greatest military in the world, um, but having a ton of nukes and aircraft carriers really only matters up until a point, and then it kind of plateaus. The returns are diminishing on each new aircraft carrier that we have after that certain point. This new Cold War we're in, we're essentially in a Cold War with the Russians and the Chinese. Just last week, we were talking about Chinese spies on this program, and now it's this massive Russian espionage attack. We are in a new Cold War, and that war is being waged with information, with technology. It's being conducted in the cybersphere. We need to double down on our cybersecurity, because the Russians and the Chinese, they're at least on par with us or beating us. It's more likely than not that we're lagging in capabilities behind the Russians and the Chinese when it comes to intelligence gathering, and espionage and cybersecurity. And that's scary stuff. You mentioned Mitt Romney. He had a tweet. I want to pull up here because I thought it was so powerful. It really describes the situation, what's going on here. He said on December 17th, "The cyber hack is like Russian bombers have been repeatedly flying undetected over our entire country. Alarming U.S. vulnerability, apparent cyber warfare weakness, glaringly inadequate cyber defenses, inexcusable silence and inaction from the White House. Past time for a national security reset that prioritizes cybersecurity capabilities and defenses." So yeah, I'm really hoping that this new administration takes this stuff seriously and really tries to excel our capabilities in those areas, and recognizes that we are in a Cold War of sorts. The inability to recognize that, I think, could really just be catastrophic. We got to take these threats seriously.
Yeah,
I don't know. Am I sounding alarmist? Tell me if I am, Jeremy.
No,
But,
I don't think so. No, I mean
yeah.
it's a huge problem. I think it's also telling that it wasn't the government that found out that discovered this hack. It was a private company that
Yeah.
knows it in their system and alerted the government. So that's a huge problem. That this has been going on undetected for who knows how long, and it's going to continue for who knows how long.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I don't know what an appropriate response is, but man, we have to retaliate somehow, some way.
Yeah.
And the sooner
there
the
needs
better.
to be a retaliation for sure. And again, we have awesome military capabilities, but we're not actually going to like when I've heard a few people, prominent figures, say that we need to retaliate. I don't think anybody's talking about physically retaliating, in terms of military might. A retaliation is probably going to come in some kind of cyber attack right back at them. That is how warfare between powerful countries is going to be conducted for the foreseeable future. The U.S. and Russia aren't going to war. Neither side wants an actual war. Same thing with U.S. and China. But there's going to be these proxy battles playing out in the cybersphere for influence around the world and for economic gain and just geopolitical supremacy and all this. I think in terms of how long this has been going on, I think the SolarWinds hack dates back to March, we believe, which is unique timing. What was going on in March? That's when the economy was crashing and the coronavirus was, boom, the new news. So while we are distracted with the coronavirus and its early stages, Russia plans out this attack. They timed it perfectly. They caught our heads in the sand. Actually, our heads were looking this way at the virus, and they're attacking us from the back. Is essentially what's going on. Um, and and once they attacked SolarWinds, they were able to upload their code essentially into a software update that SolarWinds then gave to all their customers. They have hundreds of thousands of customers, including, we already mentioned a bunch of them, Microsoft and the Treasury Department. And once they uploaded those updates, the Russians essentially got access to the computer databases of all these organizations. And the scariest thing is the ability for them to manipulate information. And this leads to something else that I fear is going to become a bigger story in the week ahead or in the weeks ahead. And this could be something that Donald Trump could use to try to retain power. Russia wants chaos here. That's what they're trying to do. They want us to doubt our elections. And Trump just lost the election. He wants us to doubt the outcome as well. And he's already saying, this is in a tweet from December 19th, the cyber hack is far greater in the fake news media than in actuality. I have been fully briefed and everything is well under control. Russia, Russia, Russia is the priority chant when anything happens, because the lamestream is, for mostly financial reasons, petrified of discussing the possibility that it may be China. It may, in parentheses. There could also have been a hit on our ridiculous voting machines during the election, which is now obvious that I won big, making it even more corrupted embarrassment for the USA. So, I mean, Trump's trying to say that somehow this attack also targeted our electoral process and that the election was stolen. And he's trying to somehow, point the finger at China's direction, saying it wasn't Russia, it was China. And why is he doing that? Because we all know that China did favor Joe Biden while Russia favored Donald Trump. So there is no evidence that the election was hacked. But I think that this is going to become the next talking point moving forward. Did you hear about this? This, I don't know if we should call it a theory or idea or a rumor. I heard a rumor that they are considering declaring martial law and like seizing all the voting booths and trying to inspect them for tampering or whatnot. Did you hear that?
I saw a headline. I saw that martial law was potentially discussed in the Oval Office in regards to seizing voting machines. I think Trump did. I haven't looked into this deeply, but I think he tweeted out soon after the story was published that it was taken out of context. That's not what they were really talking about, but it's it's from here until January 20th. It's going to be a wild ride. I definitely was not expecting to be talking about martial law today. Last week, I can only imagine what we're talking about next week.
Right. Yeah, supposedly in a meeting with Michael Flynn and Sidney Powell and some other White House officials, they were trying to look at their options essentially for keeping Trump in power. And supposedly there was some kind of big argument. I'm not exactly sure, who was involved in this argument, but I think it was actually like a shouting match, I heard. And like bits and pieces of the story were coming out. So when I say, I'm not completely sure what exactly happened, is because we're getting the spotty picture from the media. I don't think anyone's all that certain, but supposedly they were discussing the possibility of declaring martial law and inspecting the voting booths. Now, what happens if they do that and Trump collects all the voting booths and all the paper ballots, and they say, "Oh yeah, Trump actually did win." There's they didn't count all these Trump votes. Nobody's going to believe that. Nobody is going to believe that, except like the diehard Trump people. This is just scary
a
stuff.
few million will believe it.
Yeah, we're not out of the woods. And the Russians, they're just laughing. Because they just want chaos. They want us to tear ourselves apart. And that's exactly what's happening. We're becoming the divided states of America. And we got to pull ourselves back together.
Yeah, Russia has done. Well, America really has done an excellent job of tripping over itself time and time again when it comes to the whole Russia thing. And generally speaking, when it came to Russiagate during the 2016 election, when it comes to this cyber attack, when it came to how we handled sanctions with them. Also, when we talk about the Iran nuclear deal, we're also talking about relations with Russia there. When we talk about relations with North Korea, we're talking about relations with Russia. And for the past administration, we're really going back to 2014, 15. That's really kind of when the whole media spin on Russia really began, and where they started getting. The problem with Russia is we got the story wrong in the beginning, right? It's just when it came to Trump as a Russian agent, that he was in Moscow peeing on hookers and all that stuff. It's they got all that stuff wrong. That was flat out blatantly incorrect.
It's wrong, but it is weird that Trump always walks back these, it wasn't Russia, it was China. China could have hacked this, he's always walking back the Russian threat. That Helsinki conference
he does
had a few years ago, Mr. Putin told me he didn't hack our election. I have no reason to believe that he did. He's always saying, "Oh, it's probably not the Russians." What's up with that?
Right. Yeah. We have. Well, it's a combination of it's a failure of the fourth branch of government, which is the media, and it's also a failure of the executive branch of our government as well. It's just it's you're never going to have, and well, depending on who's president. I mean, during Obama's administration, there basically was lockstep between the executive and the media. However, I'm getting off track here, but yeah, one thing with Trump, and maybe this is a little unrelated too, but Trump in general, if somebody comes to Trump, or if an issue is presented and like, hey, all right, so here's a problem, the solution is A, B, or C. Trump is like, well, what about X, Y, and Z? Right? He's a fucking contrarian on every goddamn thing. He never like when do you ever hear like Trump agree with his own administration, with Congress, with the media? He's just a contrarian to the core. Like he just like COVID, especially, when it came to wearing masks, when it came to lockdowns, when it came down to having some kind of federal guidance on what to do. It's that's probably the best way, in my opinion, to sum up the totality of his presidency. In one word, just contrarian.
Yeah.
Anytime presented with evidence, goes against it. Just that's what's the most frustrating thing about him as president.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest with you, I'm not saying that Trump was a Russian mole, but that's precisely what the Russians would want. They would want a guy, casting doubt on whether or not masks work. it's exactly what they would want. They'd want a contrarian, somebody to sow distrust in everything from our elections to our response to the coronavirus, to basically supporting the QAnon people, right?
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories, uh, you know, um, the endorsement of conspiracy theories, it's all designed to just sow mistrust, and doubt everything. And now the Russians control, um, a lot of data that our government agencies have, and and a lot of our companies. I mean, who knows the full extent of all the companies that they hacked? Um, the Russians could be in our phones right now, and have the ability. Imagine the Russians hacked Snapchat, and there's like some politicians who have a Snapchat account, some powerful people. We all know what goes on Snapchat. It's the app for sending pictures of your woo-ha to people. I mean, imagine the Russians have Mitch McConnell's cock. I could see it. I could see that happening, and then that being used to blackmail him to make sure certain legislation gets passed, some doesn't. Argue against this part of the defense bill. Otherwise, this is going public. It's serious stuff. I mean, and
Yeah.
it's the same reason why I don't think what's that the other TikTok. TikTok. It's a Chinese controlled app. I mean, they say that they don't control it, but that's what they say. We shouldn't trust that. Again, we got to treat this as an attack. We are in a Cold War, or a cyber war, or whatever you want to call this. I don't know what exactly they're going to call it in the future, but I think the 2016 election and onward, in terms of geopolitics, there's going to be a certain section within our history books that talks about that period from the moment the Russians, influenced our 2016 electoral process, to what they did today. Now, it's probably going to be called the Second Cold War, or something like that. The cyber war. We're going through something serious in terms of geopolitics. Is just what I'm trying to say, and that's where we really need to put some serious attention towards.
Right. Yeah, because this kind of shit has no signs of slowing down. Before this, like the big hacks, you had what happened at Sony, you had Equifax, and like maybe a couple others that were like really high profile. Target was one. But man, those are so much smaller than than what we are currently in the middle of right now, and it's incredibly important how the Trump administration decides to deal with it, and especially how the Biden administration decides to handle it, because it's definitely not going to be cleaned up in like a month or less, right? This is going to be probably, in all seriousness, in all likelihood, going to take years to figure out.
Mm-hmm. They got to scrub down basically every single government computer. They have to uninstall the SolarWinds software from everything. A lot needs to be rebuilt. It's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to take a very long time. And if this really sets us back far. Yeah, this sets us back very far in terms of our defensive capabilities, as it relates to cybersecurity, and that is the new way that that war is going to be waged between powerful countries. It's not about battleships or aircraft carriers or nukes or tanks. It's about cyber, and we're losing. Cyber and intelligence, and we're likely losing in both those categories. All right. Should we move? Should we move on to the lockdowns in
Yeah,
London
yeah,
and the
yeah,
UK?
yeah.
All right,
And
we'll end
other
on that
great
note.
news.
Yeah.
All right. So, as you all probably have heard, the UK is entering a very tight lockdown in some parts of the country. Um, so recently, there was a new strain of the coronavirus that was detected that is estimated to be somewhere around 70% more transmissible than the early variants of the virus. So this strain
Mhm.
was identified back in the middle of October, but only within the last week or so did researchers realize a variant was much more transmissible than other variants.
Mhm.
So, with that information and seemingly a functioning federal government, they took this information and proposed some pretty strict lockdowns for the parts of the country that were being affected the worst by this particular strain, or at least by COVID infection rate numbers. So parts of the UK, including London, are going to be entering what they are calling Tier 4 restrictions. So, brief description about what this is going to be like for people there. The new restrictions are broadly similar to the national restrictions that were in place in November. Residents in the affected areas can't leave their homes except for essential trips, non essential retail, as well as indoor gyms, movie theaters, and hairdressers have been forced to close. If people want to spend time with those outside their household, it can only be one person at a time. So if you're outside your home, only one-on-one interaction with people, which is pretty crazy.
Mhm.
Um, and it needs to be outdoors. And one difference between this from November's restrictions is that communal worship can still take place. If you are not even if you're not in a tier 4 area, they are requesting that you take the similar precautions, stay in your local area. There are also going to be a police presence on the roads trying to stop people from leaving locked down areas. Which was,
Jeez.
I mean, there was rumors of some, of stuff like that occurring here in the United States early on, but it never happened. I'm curious to see what it looks like in action in the UK.
Yeah.
But but yeah, that's the gist of what's happening. Immediately afterwards, after this was announced, thousands of people tried to get the heck out of Dodge. They crowded trains. Everybody, people who had vehicles, they left. But thousands of people fled these cities afterwards, which may be counterproductive to what they were trying to achieve with these lockdown measures. But
Yeah.
that's it in a nutshell. Um, so
Yeah. So
also
I heard.
last thing I'll
Yeah.
Oh yeah, last thing I'll say.
Mhm.
So far, Ireland, Germany, France, Italy, the Netherlands, and Belgium have all banned flights and travel from the UK. And the European Union will meet Monday to discuss a coordinated response.
Yeah. So they're saying this new strain is responsible for about 60% of new cases, new coronavirus cases that are appearing in London. Um, so it's much more transmissible, up to 70% more transmissible. The good thing is that it's not more deadly. It just spreads much easier. And although we have vaccines coming out now. The UK, of course, was the first country to start administering the Pfizer vaccine. Um, it's basically just a race, to vaccinate as many people as fast as possible. There is no evidence whether or not this new strain is more resistant to the vaccine. So, we can assume as of now, unless evidence comes forward, we can assume that it's not resistant to the vaccine. But that is a possibility. And speaking of vaccines, some good news is we actually have a second vaccine that's been approved here in the United States. The Moderna vaccine is now available and being administered. So we have two vaccines, the Pfizer and the Moderna. But regardless, this is going to be a very difficult Christmas, especially for people in the UK in those tier 4 areas. Christmas travel is essentially banned. You can only celebrate Christmas within your immediate household. Still, people aren't going to follow it. There's going to be spread. There's probably going to be a post-Christmas spike everywhere. Same thing with Thanksgiving. Right now our numbers are not good. We've been hitting, I think, record cases basically every day for like the past 2 weeks or something. That's going to happen again as a result of Christmas. It's just inevitable when you have a lot of people gathering. And it's just shitty. But hopefully by the spring, we'll have there'll be so many vaccines out there that there'll actually be a vaccine glut, and that there's more vaccines than needed. I actually am an optimistic in this on this front. I think things are going to get better, but this may be a difficult month ahead. Essentially, it's Christmas. It's a time to be jolly, but it's going to be a difficult Christmas, I think. And a few weeks after Christmas, once we start seeing those Christmas numbers spike, because of course it takes like a week, 2 weeks before we start seeing the cases that are a result of Christmas. Man, I hate to bring that up at the end. It's supposed to be like Merry Christmas, everybody. We'll see you before New Year. And it's supposed to be happy and jolly. I don't want to end on a shitty note, especially shitty talking about Christmas too. But that's where we are. It's 2020.
Yeah, it's definitely we're gonna end this year in a wild way, man. It's definitely a very depressing time, considering how what our response has been to the virus and how bad it didn't have to be here in the States. When you look at other countries and what their response has been, and what their infection rate and mortality rate has been, when you look at places like Singapore, New Zealand, South Korea, and you really wonder, it's like, why wasn't that level of response something that was possible here in the States? And I'm not sure if it's a breakdown in community, a breakdown in government, but I think we messed this up, and it's going to continue to ravage our nation for 3-4 months from here on out.
Yeah, hopefully that.
Sorry to be a downer here too, but my God, yeah, it is. If it is not as bad as what you think it is, it could be worse.
Yeah. Hey, we're getting $600, right? Yeah, can't be that bad. Yeah, maybe we should have ended on the stimulus talks, $600. That's such a better note to go out on than we're all gonna die. But here we are. Here we are. That's what 2020 has been like. This year is almost over, thank God. And I think 2021 is going to be good overall. Overall. Yeah. Any other points that we should cover before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it, man.
All right. Well, I hope everybody has a lovely Christmas and happy Hanukkah to all our Jewish friends. We will record, I guess, between Christmas and New Year's. We'll have time to do another episode in 2020, and then it's off to 2021. Any final words?
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you could, please be sure to like, share, subscribe. If you agree with us, if you disagree with us, be sure to leave a comment below, and we hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah, and especially if you disagree, I'd like to hear about what do you disagree with, and why. That would be interesting to read. Thank you everybody for checking us out, and we'll see you next week. Have a great Christmas.